Welcome to the Childcare Genius Podcast, the world's #1 community for brilliant childcare leaders. Each episode will feature interviews with the brightest minds in the childcare industry to guide you into becoming a smarter business leader. Our hosts have opened 10 schools while raising 5 children. They are certified business coaches, best-selling authors, and have personally helped thousands of childcare owners around the world achieve incredible growth. Let's welcome to the Childcare Genius Podcast, Brian and Carol Dupre.
Welcome to episode 10 of the Childcare Genius Podcast.
We're your hosts, Brian and Carol Dupre.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button before we begin so you don't miss a future episode of our Childcare Genius Podcast.
We announced on our podcast last week that the Childcare Genius University is launching on December 1st, 2022.
We are so excited about this. Going to be amazing. So if you need coaching, training, or mentorship in any area of your business, visit childcaregenius.com/university. We are here to help you. Now, in this episode today, we're interviewing a friend of mine named John Abbas. John owns a childcare center in Nashville, Tennessee. He's also the host of the Mentor Nation podcast, one of my very favorite podcasts on the planet. John and I have been friends for many years, and I thought it'd be great to have him on to discuss his podcast and also his business of short-term rentals. He's a big investment guy, and we know that you'll love this episode. So get ready.
Let's get John on the line.
Hey, John, welcome to the Childcare Genius Podcast. How are you guys doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be on here. Thank you so much for having me.
This is so great. Where are you located at?
Nashville, Tennessee. Been there one time, I believe. Food was good. Remember going to some bars there and eating some barbecue. Remember, it was really, really good over in the music area. Yeah, it's a fun city now. It's growing like crazy. There's a lot to do now. And just, I don't think I'd live anywhere else at this moment.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about John?
Yeah, so entrepreneur and podcast host myself, just like you. I own a preschool, and my wife, she sells real estate, and then she owns a med spa, and then we are real estate investors. So we primarily focus on short-term rentals. And then just, once you're an investor, I invest in a lot of alternative assets, things like that. But yeah, just anything entrepreneurial is where I focus.
Now, the reason I wanted to bring John onto the podcast is because John and I met when he was a preschool owner. He's still a preschool owner. So he owns a school in Nashville area. And I coached John for a while, and he's a great guy. And he's very diversified, and diversification of your business is very important. In our Childcare Genius University, we actually teach this. And I wanted him to come on and talk a little bit about his business and his podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts in the whole world. And I think some of you, our audience, will enjoy some of the episodes he has. And then, so tell us a little bit about more. We want to hear more.
Yeah. Where do you want me to start?
Can you tell our listeners how you got into the childcare business?
Yeah. You don't look like the childcare owner.
You would laugh. Like, you'll laugh at this story. I think all the listeners will laugh. So I was in direct sales for a decade, and I was doing really well, making a lot of money. And I had a daughter, and I just got really tired of traveling. I was at a place in my life where I was like, you know what? I really want a business that I can turn it off and turn it on. I mean, like, that's what I needed at that time. And I had my daughter. I live in Franklin, Tennessee. So we go to a preschool, and they're like, yeah, it's a year wait list. And we're like, what? And then she's like, yeah, it's a year wait list, and these are our rates. And I've never done preschool before. So, it's $300 a week. And I was like, how much? I was like, it's a year wait list, and it's $300 a week. And she's like, yeah. And so we got her in finally, and we were just so unhappy. And I remember having a conversation with the director at that preschool, and she was just like, she's like, if you're not happy, you're more than welcome to go find another place. Like, no worry. I mean, it's like she was happy. Like, it was like she could care less. And And the entrepreneur side of me just kicked in that moment. I'm like, wow, what a great business where you can charge that much. You have customers out the door and you don't care if you lose customers or not because you have plenty more to replace it. And so like literally that's what happened. And so I was like, I need to own a preschool. And me and my wife were just talking about it. And it's just one of those bugs that sat in. And I kid you not, 12 years ago, when I moved back to Nashville after I lost my restaurant, I got a job for 6 months teaching ballroom dance lessons because I was so broke at that time. I was in my 20s. And this guy had pulled into the school.
All right, hold on. I got to ask. You're teaching it, so you must have been really good at it.
No, I was a good dancer,
What?
but not ballroom. So ballroom dancing, they like to hire people with no experience because it's easier to train from zero than it is to train dancers from like ballet or something. And they have to unlearn and relearn technique. So yeah, and it's embarrassing because you're literally like 3 steps ahead of the people you're teaching. So it's super awkward all the time. And I hated it. But man, I tell you, like one day this guy pulled in a Ferrari and I just was like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I own a bunch of preschools here in Nashville. And that's the only conversation I ever had with him. That's it. 12 years later, I called the dance studio and I was like, hey, like, you remember that guy that owned that Ferrari? Like, what was his name? And they're like, oh, Danny Smith. And I was like, can I get his number? And they're like, well, we can't give you that. So I just got on Google and finally got a hold of him. And I was just like, hey, I'm looking at maybe opening up a preschool. I would love to just have lunch with you. Just have you like, just give me anything. I'll buy you lunch, whatever we got to do. And long story short, his wife had died of cancer several years ago. And he started offloading his schools. And I contacted him right when he had one school left. And I bought that school from him. And I tell you, and this is why I named my podcast Mentor Nation. This is why I'm a big fan of mentorship for everybody listening. This is why everybody that's listening needs to have you guys as coaches, because I learned in 5 lunches from him how to run a successful preschool with 150 kids. You know, in 5 lunches. Some people, they'll go to school for years and years, early childhood development and all this and this and this. And it's just, that's the power of having a real awesome mentor. But yeah, I bought the school in 2018 and I've had it since. And now we're on a 1.5-year wait list. We're completely full, fully staffed. And it's just been incredible.
That is an awesome story, John. I love hearing how people get into the childcare business, especially people without a teacher background.
Right.
That is awesome. And you're making a difference in the world. And I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
You touched a little bit on your podcast, and you're the host of the Mentor Nation podcast. Tell our listeners a little bit about it and what type of guests you have on.
Yeah, so I had a mentor a long time ago that said something to me that it literally changed my life. And this is what he said. He said, you can spend a lifetime learning from your own mistakes or lunch learning from someone else's. And it's always resonated with me. He's the one that always encouraged me to read books because he's like, somebody spent years rewriting that book. They put everything they had into it, edits, how to make it perfect. And you can literally digest it in 2 to 3 hours. A life's work of someone, you can put all that knowledge into your head in 2 to 3 hours. And so I've always been fascinated with shortcuts, right? How to condense timeframes and success. And so I wanted to launch the podcast in order to give people that lunch, right? Like interview not just successful people, but creatives, people doing interesting things. I started with like the wealthiest, most successful people I could find, but I found that some of the best stories, the most inspirational stories in the world are not people that are worth $200 million. They're people like really doing what they love, what they're passionate about. And they're so excited. And those are some of my best interviews, people that have experienced insane things or they're doing really cool things. And so where I started with entrepreneurs, I'm now really focused in just creatives, entrepreneurs doing really awesome things. And my goal, like the goal from day one, was to pretend you're paid $250,000. Tell every guest this. You're paid $250,000 to give a keynote speech to an audience of 1,000 people that flew across the world to watch you speak. You have 45 minutes. What do you say? And then their answer is how I build an outline, and that's how we do the episodes.
Love that.
And what's your favorite episode so far?
I have two. One is probably the coolest concept I've ever heard. His name was Jim Gale. He's the owner of the Food Forest Abundance, and it's such a cool concept. He sold his company for a bunch of money, and now he's just doing what he absolutely loves. But basically, like, let's say you live in your home or you have a rental property, you can take pictures of any part of your yard anywhere. You send it to him, and they will create step-by-step blueprints on how to grow your own food forest. And it's perfect. You give it to a landscaper, and they'll show, like, it's a blueprint on how to start with your potatoes, and they create blueprints so that it's all natural. Like, if, bugs like to eat one vegetable, they have another vegetable right next to it that wards off. So they've helped thousands of people around the world create in their own food. Like, they don't even have to go to the grocery store for any fruits or vegetables or carbs. Like, they grow everything. Even if you don't have a big yard, you only have a small section. And it was the coolest story I'd ever heard, just and what his company's doing. My second is Bruce Willis's stunt double. Like, he's been with Bruce Willis for 20 years on every film with him. Just the things that he's seen and done. Just a phenomenal episode. Humble guy, but has just been with one of my favorite actors his entire life, and just diving into that journey was really amazing.
I love people living their best lives, because I think Carol and I, we live our best lives, and we enjoy what we do. And if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life. And
Absolutely.
Some people are like, well, why would I want to watch other people doing that? Because you'd be inspired to live your best life by watching other people live their best lives. And it gives
exactly
you
right.
ideas, places they go, things that they do. It spurs creativity in your mind.
Yep.
I love your episodes, because it's not, usually sometimes as daycare owners, we focus on only learning daycare stuff, and we get tunnel vision and we get burnt out by that. By seeing the creativity of other people, it helps to expand our own creative juices. And John, I just absolutely love your podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
How do people find it?
It's just the Mentor Nation podcast. So on Instagram, it's Mentor Nation podcast. On YouTube, it's the Mentor Nation podcast. It's on everywhere you'd listen to a podcast, Apple, Spotify, just like it's on all platforms, Google.
And your website?
mentornationpodcast.com.
Beautiful. All right. So you and I are very much alike when it comes to diversifying our childcare business with other passive income sources. And I know you invest in short-term rentals. Carol and I, we do long-term rentals. But we've got a couple furnished apartments. We've talked about doing short-term rentals. Can you tell your listeners how you create passive income through short-term rentals?
Yeah. So I had a guy on my podcast named Bill Faith, lives not too far from here, and he's made millions and millions of dollars in short-term rentals. And I've gotten to know him, and, he started in long-term rentals, and his cash on cash returns were 5 times with long-term, like with what he was making in long-term rentals. And it's not for everyone, but I love to create wow experiences for people. We started in long-term rentals, and, it was just like, it wasn't exciting for me. I mean, it was okay. And then a major system would go out and they would wipe out your whole year of profits. Right. And so if I were to do long-term rentals, I would do 4-plex and up. Like, nothing wrong with that at all. But I like short-term rentals because not only can you make more than a single family home, but you can create like a wow experience. Like, I just love looking at the reviews. So we started small and like short, sweet. So I talked to Bill. Bill's like, look, man, if you don't have experience, just go the simplest route possible. And me and my wife, I kid you not, we had dinner, and we were like, you know what? Why don't we buy a place, and like a place that we would want to visit, and let our vacations be paid for by other people's vacations? That was like our motto. And we love beach, lake, cabin, and that's all we focus on. Beach, lake, cabin. We started with beach. And Bill told me, he's like, if you're going to do it, just go as simple cookie cutter as you can at first. Buy something turnkey, fully furnished, that was already a rental. Like, you can't go wrong there. You can have the numbers, the track record. So we started with a little 2-bed, 2-bath beach condo on Gulf Shores. And just for your listeners, we're not buying short-term rentals at this moment because I believe investing is cyclical. There's a time to buy and there's a time not to buy. Buying right now, while real estate is, everybody still thinks their properties are worth way more than they really are, and interest rates are ridiculous. It's the worst time, I believe, to buy property. But there's cycles, and I feel like we're going to be soon in a place where, there's going to be a lot of properties flooding the market and there's going to be great buying opportunities. But we started there, and I mean, it was just awesome. We were making great money. So then we focused on cabin, and we just learned, we immersed ourselves. We found a mentor. Bill was our mentor, and we listened to everything that he did. And in the span of a year and a half, we were able to go from no short-term rentals to 3 short-term rentals worth $3 million.
Awesome. And John, just so that all listeners know, we're recording this in the fall of 2022. And that's the time. So somebody could be listening this in 2025 and it'd be a really good time. So don't take what he said, just look at the timing, because things change. And also in your market too, we're still buying. It keeps hitting my we've cut buying all through. We have to go through a few bit more deals, but we buy 4 units mostly. Yep. And we bought a couple $1 million worth in the last year and a half. And even though the market is high, interest rates were good, and we were able to find good deals. Of course, we have to sift through 5 or 10 bad deals to find the good ones, but we're still buying and still looking actively, even if we're at the high down. And we know it's going to get even better down the road.
Absolutely.
In different markets of the country, it's changing too. In your market, obviously, it's different. But I've seen some of your properties, and they are amazing. I mean, incredible, wow experiences. If I didn't live on a lake already, I would come stay at your lake place. That's absolutely stunning.
I didn't know you live on a lake.
I've lived on a lake for 4 years, and we live on a beautiful, it's some lakes in other states, they call it a lake, it's a half a mile by half a mile, they call it a lake. Our lake is 7 miles long and 2 miles wide. It's a big lake. And we love lake living.
I love it.
Go on a boat, jet skiing, sailing. We just love lake life. It is nothing like it. And we love ocean, because we go to the Caribbean, 4 or 5 times a year. So we love the water.
Yeah.
We love the sun. Awesome. We love the water. We just
I love it. I love it. And just to clarify, when I'm talking about I wouldn't buy anything now, I'm talking to the beginner real estate investor, someone that doesn't know how to sift through, like, to experienced real estate investors. I mean, it's always opportunity, right? Like, you can find deals, what you're looking for. But in vacation rentals specifically, people don't want to accept that their property values are going down. And so they're still trying to get top dollar, and they're using 2021 numbers to pitch their investment, which we all know is so I was specifically talking about short-term rentals.
Yeah, and you told us you did do long-term first.
I did.
It gave you the experience, and I would probably recommend to somebody to not get into short-term initially, unless you really know what you're doing, because it is a higher risk factor, because you're going to have vacancies rather.
That's right.
And your cash flow might not be there, and there's a lot of competition in there as well. So you'd have to really know your market, and that comes with experience. I just haven't had the experience yet to dive into that, but I'm watching you. I watch your podcast, I listen, and eventually we might get into that realm. But it's like I said, it's very profitable once you get there, and once you do you probably get hooked on it. But we're learning, and when we teach in the university, we'll be teaching both aspects. And I'll bring an expert probably like you to help teach on that short-term rental, because I'm not the expert with that.
Awesome. Happy to help anytime.
Awesome.
So what are some investments you recommend for center owners trying to diversify?
So I've always loved real assets. I started so like, me and my wife, we're kind of cyclical. We're a little bit, we're always reading and paying attention and seeing what works. We're not super, like all about taking humongous risks. So like right now, I like alternative assets just because they're like, I'm not investing anything in the stock market right now. I mean, it's just very volatile, and you don't know when the bottom, and there's just so many things. Like, I was a big stock market investor, but now there's just so much global things happening. Russia war, China supply chain, recession, China's housing market. I mean, it's just you don't know what's going to happen. So I like alternative asset classes. And believe it or not, most of my knowledge came from having guests on my podcast. You have guests in areas that you want to learn. So I had a great guest that was successful wine investor. I have had precious metal investors. I've had currency collectors on the podcast. I've had just a lot of different people. So right now I am focusing just like at this moment, I'll go to auctions, online auctions, and I'll just bid on gold, silver, currencies, things like that. And then I'll buy wine and then art. I'm investing a lot in art. Art has historically appreciated throughout no matter what for the last 100 years. There's a website that I use. They're the biggest. It's called masterworks.io. It's basically fractional ownership of art. So they'll buy like a Picasso, and then you can buy shares of that Picasso that's housed in an LLC, and it's your shares. So you can invest as little as $500 and you own a fractional share of that Picasso. And, when they typically hold 3 years, 5 years, and they'll sell. And it's just the companies, they're huge. They're a multi-billion-dollar company now. They do really well. And I've got fractional shares of a lot, one exit, and it was a 30% annual return. So it was great. So I like alternative assets right now at this moment, but I'm always a big fan, just real assets, something that you can hold, touch, something that, like real estate is always going to be my number one asset, always.
Now, John, was your childcare business the catalyst to help give you the finances to start investing?
100%. I didn't invest anything until I had mastered that childcare business.
I wanted to make that point across to the listeners that he didn't use real estate to supplement his childcare business, the other way around. And tell me how it affected your tax structure. You probably save a whole lot of money on taxes by investing in real estate.
A ton. I mean, our CPA, and I'm not a tax genius, but our CPA structured everything very intelligently. We have our business and everything, our income flows into a partnership, and the partnership is what buys all of our assets, whether it's real estate or whatever. And then, with short-term rentals, if we make a lot of money in a year, we just do a cost segregation on one of the short-term rentals. And it's no time to explain all that, but it saves us a lot of money. It's basically allows you to front load your depreciation. Yep. And it's just been huge for us. So it's allowed us to capture the appreciation, maximize the depreciation, and have the cash flow at the same time. So it's great. But I just want to make one point to all the listeners. I see a lot of people trying to diversify before they're ready. And I see a lot of people brag about having multiple streams of income. Multiple streams of income when not one of them is strong and stable is literally, I think, in my opinion, a waste of time. Master one thing before. We never diversified until my wife was crushing real estate and our preschool was crushing it. Yeah. Until then we were 100% laser focused on maximizing. And then once the preschool was full, it was profitable and it was stable. And that's when we started investing heavily, but not until that point. So I just wanted to make that point because a lot of people, they feel like they're missing out if they're not diversifying before they're ready.
And we have a lot of listeners that they're doing well in profitability in the childcare center, and maybe their spouse has a higher income job and they're paying a boatload in taxes. And we, through the university, we're teaching people how to lower that tax burden. And the money you save can actually buy a property a year just in your tax savings.
100%.
It's amazing how much you could save $100,000 a year in taxes. And that's 25% down payment on a $400,000 4-unit or a 2-unit in some markets. So it's amazing. You can actually use money you would pay in taxes to actually build your real estate portfolio. And we're going to teach all that in childcare.
That's a whole other podcast episode, but you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Like, just why give more to Uncle Sam than you have to?
Exactly. John, where's your vacation happy place? It's our mindset question for today.
Iceland, 100%. I've never in my life, I was in the Navy, so I traveled the world. And there's never been a place that I've visited that took my breath away as much as Iceland did. I mean, it's just every 15 miles, you're in a different world. The biggest waterfalls I've ever seen, the most greenery. I mean, just views that I can't even describe. We were there for 2 weeks, brought the whole family. And I mean, it's the only thing we can talk about anytime we're together. It's just incredible.
Hey, I forgot, Carol and I were both in the Navy. I forgot that you were in the Navy. And when I was in the Navy, I was stationed in Iceland for 2 years. And and when you were there, we talked back and forth a couple times, and it was amazing. It was kind of lived vicariously through you, and it brought back a lot of memories. What's one or two of your favorite memories of your trip?
Well, so I love the movie Eurovision. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's Will Ferrell, Rachel McAdams. It's like a comedy. Some people hate it. I loved it. And the entire film was shot, most of it was shot in Husavik, which is in Iceland. And so a lot of it was filmed there. And so when we went there, the thing that I wanted to do more than anything was go to the spot that they were at the beginning of the movie where they're playing this song called Volcano Man. The piano is still there on the rock overlooking. It's still there. It's where they filmed it. And so that was, for me, was just the best. They were actually there. They shot it. It's the most incredible view I've ever seen. Black sand beaches with huge, just the massive, expensive views. But that was awesome. And then the food. I did not expect the food to be that good. It was the best food I've ever had.
It's an amazing country. Just make sure you go in July or August, because every other month is cold. And if you go in the wintertime, you won't see anything because it's dark 24 hours a day. It's definitely a unique country and an amazing experience. I lived there from I was 18 years old to 20 years old. First time away from home on a military base there, and it was a great experience. And
disclaimer: go in July or August.
August.
Yeah,
maybe late June. But yeah, and get ready for an amazing experience of the sun being out at midnight, which is an amazing experience. We had a midnight softball league that we used to play in, and you tell that to people, and it's hard to explain. You get out of the club at 2 a.m. and the sun's out, and it makes it hard to sleep in the summertime for sure.
It does, but worth it still.
Well, John, this has been an amazing episode, and you're an amazing guy. I'm glad we're friends. And
same.
Thank you for taking the time to explain some of the things you do. I think you really brought value to a lot of our listeners today.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate y'all.
Have a good day, John.
I really enjoyed interviewing John.
It was great. We have so much in common. We're both in the Navy, we're both in the childcare business, both in the real estate investment business. We have a lot in common. Haven't met his wife yet, but I'm looking forward to having them up. We were just talking the other day about him and his wife coming up and visiting us here in Maine. And we're very much looking forward to have him here doing that. He's just an amazing guy. And I know the listeners got a lot out of it as well, about how you could take your profits from your childcare business and spend that into reducing your taxes, number one, and investing and making more money in other businesses, number two. Yeah. Now, before we go, we'd like to let you know that this podcast episode is sponsored by Elif Childcare Insurance.
We use Elif, and so should you. They're very well versed in the childcare field.
Yep.
Give Blake a call at 972-866-4065 and ask for a free quote. Be sure to tell him Brian and Carol sent you.
Yeah, sure. We love Elif Childcare Insurance, and we're proud to have them as a sponsor of our podcast. Now, this concludes episode 10 of the Childcare Genius podcast.
And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a future episode. And we'll see you again real soon.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Childcare Genius podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a future episode. Don't forget to visit our website at childcaregenius.com to see a list of services we offer to help your childcare business grow. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the Childcare Genius community.